As parents and caregivers, we're used to putting the needs of our family above everything else. Whether it's caring for a child with chronic illness, supporting a spouse through a health crisis, or managing the everyday ups and downs of family life, it can feel like we're always on duty. But sometimes that constant care comes at a cost, and we find ourselves running on empty. That's what emotional burnout feels like. It's when you've given so much of yourself that there's almost nothing left. Over the years, we've both experienced emotional burnout. When you're trying to manage someone else's health, it's easy to lose sight of your own well-being. It sneaks up on you little by little until one day you wake up and realize that you're completely drained. The emotional toll of caregiving can be overwhelming, and if you don't find ways to cope, it can affect every part of your life, from your physical health to your mental stability and even your relationships. We want to share some of what we've learned about coping with burnout, because if you're reading this and feeling like you're close to your breaking point, you're not alone. There are ways to manage this, and while it's not always easy, it's important to take care of yourself too. The first step in coping with emotional burnout is recognizing it. For a long time, we didn't even realize we were burnt out. We were so focused on caring for our son and handling everything that came with his diagnoses that we ignored our own exhaustion. But burnout has a way of showing itself in subtle and not so subtle ways. You might find yourself getting frustrated more easily, feeling hopeless, or snapping at the people around you. Little things that wouldn't normally bother you suddenly feel overwhelming. Physical symptoms are common too. We've both had days where we felt completely run down, dealing with headaches, muscle pain, or stomach issues, things we knew were more about stress than anything else. Sleep is another big one. When you're burnt out, you either can't sleep because your mind is racing, or you're so exhausted that all you want to do is sleep, but never feel rested. The hardest part is admitting that something's wrong, because caregivers often feel like they have to be strong all the time. But it's okay to admit when you're struggling. If you're feeling any of these signs, it's time to take a step back and reevaluate how you're managing everything. One of the biggest lessons we've learned as caregivers is that you can't pour from an empty cup. You might feel guilty taking time for yourself when someone you love is struggling, but if you don't, you'll burn out even faster. Self-care isn't selfish, it's necessary. The problem is, when you're a caregiver, finding time for yourself can feel impossible. You're already stretched so thin that the idea of taking even 5 minutes to relax seems out of reach. We've found that the key is to start small. You don't need to carve out hours of me time, though if you can, that's great. Even taking a few minutes each day to breathe, go for a short walk, or do something that brings you joy can make a difference. It's about making self-care a priority, even in little ways. Sometimes we take turns. One of us will take a break while the other handles things for a while. It's important to work together and support each other so neither one of us gets completely burnt out. We also realize that asking for help isn't a sign of failure. There's no shame in reaching out to friends, family, or professionals for support. Whether it's someone to talk to or someone to help with caregiving, allowing others to step in can give you the mental break you desperately need. Guilt is something that comes with the territory when you're a caregiver. There's guilt over not doing enough, guilt over not being able to fix things, guilt over feeling frustrated when your loved one needs you. We've both struggled with this, especially when it comes to our son. There are days when we wish we could take all of his pain away, and when we can't, it's hard not to feel like we're failing him. But guilt is something we have to learn to manage, because it's not productive. Beating ourselves up doesn't help our son, and it doesn't help us. We've had to remind ourselves, sometimes daily, that we're doing the best we can. Caregiving isn't about perfection, it's about doing what you can with the resources you have. That might mean making tough decisions, like taking a break when you feel overwhelmed or seeking outside help. We've had to let go of the idea that we need to be everything for everyone. Guilt will probably always be part of caregiving, but it doesn't have to control us. Being kind to ourselves and recognizing our limits has made a big difference in how we handle those feelings. Boundaries are something we didn't think much about in the beginning, but now we realize how crucial they are. When you're a caregiver, it's easy to let your loved one's needs take over every aspect of your life. We've been guilty of this more times than we can count, especially during the worst of our son's symptoms. But what we've learned is that setting boundaries isn't about neglecting your loved one. It's about creating a balance that allows you to keep going. For us, this has meant setting clear limits on how much we take on at once. There are some things that we simply can't do all the time, and that's okay. We've also had to create boundaries around our mental health. If one of us is feeling too stressed or overwhelmed, we make it a point to step away, even if it's just for a little while. We're better caregivers when we take care of our own emotional needs too. Boundaries also help us protect our relationship. Being caregivers together can strain even the strongest partnerships. We've had to be honest with each other about what we need and when we need breaks. That honesty, along with respecting each other's limits, has helped us cope better as a team. Dealing with the emotional roller coaster. Caring for someone with chronic illness or mental health challenges means constantly riding an emotional roller coaster. Some days you feel like you've got everything under control, and others, you feel like you're falling apart. The ups and downs are exhausting. We've had moments of joy, especially when we see improvements in our son, but we've also had plenty of dark days where we just didn't know how we were going to keep going. One of the things that's helped us cope is understanding that these emotions are normal. It's okay to feel angry, frustrated, or sad. There's no shame in having days where you just don't feel strong. We've had to remind ourselves that caregiving is emotionally taxing, and no one can do it perfectly all the time. Talking about our feelings with each other and with trusted friends or counselors has been a lifeline. It's a release valve that keeps us from letting the pressure build up too much. We've also tried to focus on the small victories. When you're in the middle of caregiving, it's easy to only see the problems, but we've found that celebrating the little wins, no matter how small, helps lighten the load. Maybe it's a day where our son's pain is more manageable, or maybe it's simply making it through a tough week. Those moments of positivity keep us going. One of the hardest things for caregivers to do is accept help. It's so easy to fall into the mindset that you have to do everything yourself. We've both been there. We didn't want to burden anyone else with our problems, and we felt like it was our responsibility to handle everything. But over time, we realized that we couldn't do it alone. Whether it's accepting help from friends and family or working with professionals, we've learned that asking for support isn't a sign of weakness. It's a way to take care of ourselves so we can keep taking care of our son. Whether it's someone stepping in to give us a break or a counselor helping us process the emotional side of caregiving, those moments of relief are critical. We can't do this alone, and we don't have to. Moving forward with compassion for ourselves. Caregiving isn't easy, and it's not something that comes with a manual. We're still learning as we go, and we're trying to be kinder to ourselves in the process. Burnout is real, but it doesn't mean we're bad caregivers. It means we're human. Taking steps to cope with burnout, whether it's by setting boundaries, finding moments of joy, or asking for help, isn't just good for us. It's good for the people we care for. If you're reading this and feeling overwhelmed, know that you're not alone. Caregiving can feel isolating, but there are others out there who understand what you're going through. It's okay to admit that you need help and that you're struggling. It's okay to take time for yourself. By caring for yourself, you're giving yourself the strength to keep going, and that's something to be proud of.